What am I going to say? I don't have anything to say now. Mr. Jeremiah, your eyes are swollen.
Queen Idiania Sige, Emotanokpoko, Queen Ewere, Queen Eden, Imagwero. These are great women of time past who made history and changed the negative narrative. I am Asein Angel Osariemen, a diploma graduate of marine engineering from University of Benin and a current 500 level student studying fisheries and aquatic biology in Lagos State University. I am attempting to break the Guinness World Record for longest marathon read aloud, and I'll be reading for 200 hours. I'll be reading 60% books on Edo culture, tradition, and history. And I'll be reading 30% books on Nigerian history. And I'll be reading 10% books on United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, focusing on Goal 4, which talk about quality education, Goal 5, which talk about gender equality, Goal 13, which talk about climate action, and Goal 14, which talk about life below water. Do you know that the plastic waste you use, if not properly disposed, can affect animals in the water? I believe you don't know that. Come read with me and I'm going to teach you how you can properly manage your waste. The venue for this reading attempt is at Edo State Library Complex at the Edo State Secretariat. The date of this event is the 23rd of February to 3rd of March 2024. This event will be live streamed on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm calling on you in helping me reach out to more people as we break this record attempt together. God bless Nigeria. God bless Edo State. Oba Atokbeye is here. This is the ancient city of Benin in Edo State, a land with deep-rooted history, culture, and tradition. Queen Idiania Sige, Emotanokpoko, Queen Ewere, Queen Eden, Imagwero. These are great women of time past who made history and changed the negative narrative. I am Asein Angel Osariemen, a diploma graduate of marine engineering from University of Benin and a current 500 level student studying fisheries and aquatic biology in Lagos State University. I am attempting to break the Guinness World Record for longest marathon read aloud, and I'll be reading for 200 hours. I'll be reading 60% books on Edo culture, tradition, and history. And I'll be reading 30% books on Nigerian history. And I'll be reading 10% books on United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, focusing on Goal 4, which talk about quality education, Goal 5, which talk about gender equality, Goal 13, which talk about climate action, and Goal 14, which talk about life below water. Do you know that the plastic waste you use, if not properly disposed, can affect animals in the water? I believe you don't know that. Come read with me and I'm going to teach you how you can properly manage your waste. The venue for this reading attempt is at Edo State Library Complex at the Edo State Secretariat. The date of this event is the 23rd of February to 3rd of March 2024. This event will be live streamed on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm calling on you in helping me reach out to more people as we break this record attempt together. God bless Nigeria. God bless Edo State. Oba Atokbeye is here. This is the ancient city of Benin in Edo State, a land with deep-rooted history, culture, and tradition. Queen Idiania Sige, Emotanokpoko, Queen Ewere.
Hello. Mic is off. Good day, everybody. My mic is off. Good day, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen. Hello. Good day, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you all for your time and for your support so far. My thanks goes to everyone who has supported in every way. I really want to say I thank you and I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. I'll be starting with the book Not Always Easy, My Voyage from Obscurity. Thank you. Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumble and fell. Though an host will rise against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For in time he shall hide me in his pavilion. In his secret tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock, and now shall my head be set up above my enemies. Thank you, Jesus. Good day, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for your presence, for your support so far, individuals, organizations, government agencies, the Edo State Government, Ministry of Art and Culture, Ministry of Education, Genius Orb, Team Reme, my family, my father, my biological father, my father who has adopted me, Engineer Greg Ugbefu. I say thank you. Thank you everyone for your support. I really want to appreciate you. Everyone who has come to appreciate me so far, I thank you. Commissioner for Digital, I thank you. Everybody has been so supportive so far. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I'll be starting with the book, Not Always Easy, My Voyage from Obscurity. It's a book written by Engineer Greg Ugbefu, and the book talks about the growth from grass to grace. It's a book that resonates with me personally. If you read this book, you will know that if you think it, you can achieve it. Thank you very much. Technical. Can I start? Not always easy, my voyage from obscurity. ISBN 978-986-037-1. Section 1, Early Life. Chapter 1, In Quest for a Son. In Quest of a Son. 1912. It is hard to look at that year in history and not think about the tragic Titanic. That great ship, an employee of White Star Line, at the time of its launch, had audaciously claimed, not even God himself could sink this ship. Yet, the Titanic disastrously sank in the Atlantic Ocean after unexpectedly hitting an iceberg south of the Grand Bank. The world then was shaken by that tragedy at sea that took away 1,500 souls. Sad as it was, life moved on, and much of it on the sea. But in my personal story, 1912, it's more about a birth than a tragic death. It was the year my father, Jackson Igbinosa was born. His father, my grandfather, was a trader who did much of his business in the old Benin Empire on the shores of that same Atlantic Ocean, exchanging agricultural produce like palm oil and salt for alcoholic drinks, match, gunpowder, clothes, processed food, and other items. His customers were white men who came on their ships via the Atlantic to explore the much acclaimed resources of Africa. The trade was strictly by barter. My grandfather, who had ownership of several canoes, transported the local goods from the hinterlands to the great Giligili port, where the white men waited to exchange the goods. Giligili port, which is located in the present-day Ovia Northeast Local Government Area of Edo State, is famed for its importance in Benin history. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was a focal point for British, Dutch, French, and Portuguese traders into the Benin Kingdom. It is a mere coincidence that his grandson, over 100 years later, would own ships, trade across waters, and be saddled with the responsibility of restoring that legendary Giligili port to make it commercially viable again. I occasionally ponder on this each time I oversee the purchase of another ship for my enterprise. Stars Investment Company Limited, and whenever I am busy at work as chairman of the technical committee for rebuilding the Giligili port, now to be known as the Benin City River Port. My grandfather owned canoes, was entrepreneur, wealthy, adventurous, and free-spirited. His settling was not on the Titanic the day his son, Jackson Igbinosa, was born, but he could as well have been anywhere along the shores of that same ocean, for it was there he thrived. The birth of my father in 1912 was indeed thousands of miles away from the locality of the Titanic tragedy. It was at Benin, the remnant of a once mighty Africa empire, which had considerable economic relation with the European trader, who not only traded local goods, as with my grandfather, but would subsequently travel back and forth via the same route to exchange slaves for goods. The Benin Kingdom, which lasted from 11 AD to 1897, was one of the many kingdoms the British had found in the area now called Nigeria, and had forcefully joined together to form another country. That formation was in 1914, 2 years after my father was born. Before then, Benin was simply part of 3 colonies the British had created and administered. So you could say my father was not born in Nigeria. He became one in 1914. The same can be said for my grandfather and every other person alive in that region before the amalgamation of the colonies to form Nigeria. My grandfather's ancestors, and consequently mine, were of the Ogbede Oyo family of the Benin Kingdom, who produced the Hago, father of the Obasekis, the Ahobamies, the Ogbefuns, and a host of other children. The then Osuma of Benin Kingdom, Chief Ahobamie, was my grandfather Eda's brother. Together with the Iyase, Esokban, and Eson titles, the Osuma of Benin is part of the Kadele Eneore, or simply put, the four cardinal chiefs of the Benin Kingdom. Jackson Igbinosar, a fireball yearning for greatness. At the time of my grandfather passing on, he was survived by several daughters and an only son, Jackson Igbinosar, my father, who was a mere 6 old. After my grandfather's death, my father and one of his sisters, Ideva, had to go and live with their uncle, Chief Ahobamie. This in itself was nothing new. However, what was newsworthy is that years after he moved in with his uncle, Jackson Igbinosar had made no progress educationally or vocationally. He was neither enrolled in school for formal education, nor was he allowed to learn a trade or craft. However, the young Jackson had a sight on personal development and independence. After many years of living with his granduncle, he informed his guardian of his interest in learning carpentry. 3 years after signifying this interest, his uncle was yet to sign the necessary apprentice agreement. The Jackson Igbinosar eventually learned carpentry, which he became skilled at, was by a dint of a miracle and not without more struggle. It took him getting a third party, a certain Mr. Omobogie, to sign the apprenticeship agreement for him to commence the training. For the next 3 years, Jackson Igbinosar went on to be trained in carpentry and woodwork. It was an early manifestation of Jackson Igbinosar's toughness and doggedness. There was no silver spoon, and he would yet become a man who fought for everything good. He was my first teacher and role model. It was from him I first learned that life is tough and you have to fight for what you want. In the 1940s, Taylor Woodrow, a United Kingdom-based construction company, opened an office in Nigeria. It was in this company that my father got his first carpentry job as an employee. At the time, Nigeria was still a colony of the British Empire, and many British-owned companies operated in the country. While at Taylor Woodrow, Jackson Igbinosar was transferred to Odo and later to Cameroon. This was when southern Cameroon was still part of Nigeria before it opted to be part of present Cameroon through a referendum. He was eventually transferred to Aba, which is located in today Abia State, southeast of Nigeria. Aba, in the 1940s, was a significant commercial center as part of Nigeria's Old Eastern region. Initially, Aba was made up of villages like Aba Uku, the premium village in Aba, Ezioku Aba, Obuda Aba, and Umokpoji Aba. But other villages were later merged with it when the British made it an administrative center for the colonial government. After some time, my father left Woodrow and got a job with the Federal Ministry of Trade and Commerce. The ministry had been renamed the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. This was at a time when it was easy to get government jobs. It was while he was at Aba that my mother conceived me. My father was in Aba till 1958. Before meeting my mother, my father had had a series of bad experiences in the area of parenting. As if the malevolent spirit that orphaned him at a tender age resurrected, my father, at first, had poor luck with children. Having married 3 wives in succession, he had no child to show for it. Well, it was not that the wives did not bear children. They did. But for some strange reason, they all died at infancy. The frustration accompanying the rapid and unexplainable deaths pushed my father to divorce as rapidly as he married. Superstitions provide easy answers for problems in Africa, and very much so in Benin. People had reasons for my father's plight, and none of the reasons included anything medical or simple coincidence. Something was wrong. It had to be sinister. Regardless of what the matter could be, not having any surviving child was not an option. My father was willing to settle for his doggedness came to bear. In full force once again, Fortune took note of his tenacity and smiled on him after he sent his 3rd wife away and traveled to Benin in search of another. In Benin, his relations eagerly told him about a young lady, Cecilia Izogie Osariemen, who had been living with her uncle, Mr. Broderick, in Enugu. Cecilia had no education or skills, as she had been like a house help in her uncle's house. A similarity she shared with my father while he was living with his own grand-uncle before taking up carpentry. By now, prim and psycho father was intrigued by the earnest acclaim about the beautiful and charming young lady he had never met. Like any sharp, discerning young man, he quickly requested to meet her. The meeting was destiny silently at work. The moment Jackson set his eyes on Cecilia, he knew he was not going to let her go. Struck by her duty, it was unquestionable love at first sight. Not long afterward, they got married, and he took her to Aba with him. A star is born. My parents lived at number 145 Ehi Road in Aba. Months after their marriage, my mother gave birth to a daughter, who they christened Elizabeth Izegbuwa Ogbefu. Elizabeth is older than me by 5 years. 2 years after she had Elizabeth, My mother gave birth to another daughter, who unfortunately died as soon after she was born. 2 years after this incident, my mother became pregnant again. At this time, my father had had enough. As Cecilia neared the delivery date, he, haunted by his previous losses, told her to go and have the baby in a maiden home in Benin. Now, not only was my father yearning for a child that would survive, he specifically wanted a male. So desperate was he for a son that he did not want Cecilia to return home if she delivered a baby girl. Cecilia traveled to Benin, hoping and fervently praying that she will have a boy. On 11th February 1951, at number 10 Ihogbe Street, Benin City, she gave birth to me, the boy she had asked God for. Finally, her prayer was answered. News of my birth was sent to my father in Aba. He was absolutely ecstatic. He threw an all-night party celebrating the birth of his first son. After the traditional 8 days, the naming ceremony was conducted with all the requisite items: yam, palm oil, coconut, coins, and so on. In those days, these were items usually made available during a naming ceremony. I was christened Sunday Eboirutone Ogbefu. After a 3-month convalescence period, the joyous Cecilia Ogbefu, with her tender son, traveled back to Aba to meet her husband. My father finally had that son that he had always wanted, a boy who survived. I was his much needed relief. This meant he could pour all the love he could on me. Back then, sons meant a lot in the traditional African society, which was mostly patriarchal. A man could have 10 daughters, but would still be made to feel like he was childless until he had a son. Daughters were love and valued too, but nothing made a man complete like when he had a son. A proper heir as far as society was concerned. Since traditional African societies were structured largely around the lives of children, progenitors represented continuity. With rituals and established institutions designed to ensure society survival, perpetuation, and prosperity. Family survival was always hinged on children, and the male child was regarded as crucial in that regard. It was no different in my family, even in the 1950s when I was born. To my father, having me meant the world to him. There was no big bang social or spiritual event surrounding my birth. It was as normal as any other day. But a lot was happening politically around that time. In 1951, agitations for independence from colonial rulership had intensified in Nigeria. The British had more or less given into the idea that Nigeria had to become an independent state. The foundation of the political structure that will be adopted by a free Nigerian has been laid. Aba was part of the Eastern region, one of the three regions the British had split Nigeria into to form a federal system of government. Each of the three regions had a premier. It was in my birth year that a new constitution kicked into effect to ensure devolution of powers to the regional government on a specific range of subjects by the colonial central government. It gave the balance of power to Nigerians. Soon, Nigeria would become a federation. The region would gain internal self-government and the country would become independent. Of course, I was unaware of this as a newborn babe. My world revolved primarily around Jackson and Cecilia, my custodians and gateway into this planet. They gave me their all to cater for me, regardless of their limitations, and those limitations were many. There is no other way to put it. My parents were economically poor. Losing his dad before he turned 10 meant that my father was going to struggle considerably through life, and that was exactly what happened. He was hardly ever able to escape the shackles of lack, the early loss of his father tied to him. Notwithstanding, the poverty situation brought out great character traits in both he and my mother, traits they would later inculcate in their children. What they lack in finance, they made up for in characters and values. This proved invaluable time and again. But in reality, they did not ease the pain at moments of lack. My parents' rented abode in Aba was a face me, I face you apartment, a housing depiction of poverty in many parts of Nigeria. Under this housing arrangement, you have a house with several rooms and various tenants rent individual rooms. In Aba, my family lived in 2 rooms. The house had a communal courtyard in its center, as well as kitchens, toilets, and bathroom towards the back, which we, the tenants, all shared. There was no pipe-borne water in the house, so we fetched water from the public work tap nearby. In the kitchen, every tenant had a small locker where they kept their extra utensils locked up. Our family had a special metal base where we put our own firewood. Each tenant also had a small wire mesh basket where they kept their dry fish and other dry food items, usually overhanging the fireplace. People live honorably and decently, as no one ever interfered with other people's stuffs. In the evening, neighbors would gather in the courtyard to sit around and tell stories, joke, and have fun under the moonlight. It was our own collective responsibility to maintain the cleanliness of the compound, and every tenant took turns to sweep. The landlord came once a month to collect his rent, and would appoint one of the tenants as a caretaker. Our house was a corner plot on a fairly busy road. My father had a bicycle, which he kept in the alleyway, but it was not the only one. All the dads kept their bicycle there too. As a child, I grew up with a pointed streak of curiosity. I asked questions about everything I came across. In fact, at the age of 3, my father felt I was smart enough to start primary school. So I was taken to one just around the corner from home. However, when the school official asked me to put one of my hand over my head, the hand could not reach my ear on the other side, so I was disqualified from enrollment. That was the crude method officially used to determine if a child was old enough to begin school in those days. It was not until I was 5 years old when my hand could cross over my head and touch my adjacent ear that I was allowed to start primary school. A little house help. Just before I started primary school, my father sent me to live with Mr. Edogun, an educated, rich, and successful friend of his. He was what we call in Nigeria a big man. And one proof was that he owned a car. In the 1950s and 1960s, having a car defined your status symbol. Well, it is still the same to an extent. Only nowadays, it is more about the type of car you own rather than whether or not you own one. What we call big manism in Nigeria is not a recent social phenomenon. It existed as far back as when I was a child. My father wanted me exposed to certain trainings in life. Hence, he asked Mr. Edogun to accept me as a houseboy who could help out with washing clothes, cleaning, and running errands. Mr. Edogun accepted my father's proposal, so I went to live with him. Once in a while, when he was going out with family, he took me along. Imagine poor me in the big man car. I was always incredibly excited. Sitting at the back, gazing through the window, feeling the breeze as the car moved along the road and taking in the scenery. I would often dream of what life would be like if I could afford good things. Mr. Edogun's social environment was an eye-opener that gave me my tender, impressionable mind unprecedented exposure, being close to the type of wealth I had never experienced, helped to expand my mind and made me believe I could one day become a big man myself. But I cried a lot because I missed home. How often do we realize in life that what matters most are our loved ones? At that time, the only loved ones I knew were my parents. Every time my mother came to visit me, I would beg her to take me home. when my misery got to her and she would not take it anymore, she went telling all the Benin indigenes living around our home in Aba to plead with my father so he would bring me back. My father eventually succumbed after a few months, and much to my relief, I returned home. But I am glad I had the experience at Mr. Edogun's house, because for many years I kept that memory of what a big man's house looked like, what it was like to ride in a big man car, what he fed on, and how he dressed. Vision is a powerful thing. Once a person, even a child, gets a picture of what the future can be, he or she would become drawn to that sight, and it will seem like the universe conspired to make the vision a reality. That was what made my father's decision to make me live with Mr. Edogun a smart one, despite its downside. Things are a lot different today, though, since technology had made the world flat. Nowadays, from a computer, phone, or TV, a child can see far and beyond, even if he lives in a village. Technology can make any child living anywhere in the world today. It can make a child dream big. However, the way it is done, I believe exposure is essential for expanding the mind. And once the mind is expanded, there is no limit to what an individual can achieve. We were not rich, but my father was never one to accept that lot, lie down and die in penury. Why at 145 a road, Aba, he bought a piece of land and built his own house from his carpentry work, proving that one can make something out of nothing. 2 years after I was born, my parents were blessed with a set of twins, Taiwo, a boy, and Kainde, a girl. This addition brought a lot of joy and excitement to the family. As a kid myself, I would spend a lot of time staring at the tiny toddlers crying in their cribs when they were hungry or simply wanted attention. The joy and excitement were short-lived, though a year later we lost little Kainde to an inexplicable illness. My mother was devastated by this incident, and my father was not less so, considering that he never wanted to recount the past losses of his female children. The surviving twin, Taye, continued to grow, and as the year progressed, we kept bonding. Taye now lives in the United States of America with his wife, Esoe, their children and grandchildren. Akara, and a discovered talent. By the time I eventually started primary school, like other kids, I used to take along with me a black slate and white chalk. I remember my first primary school was a walking distance from home. My parents would dress me up and I would carry my slate on my head as I walked to school. My mother always packed akara, bean cake, and put them in my short pocket as my snack for the break time. Akara is a Nigerian snack made with beans or filters, which has migrated to a number of West African countries as well as Brazil. It has become popular in Ghana, Togo, Benin, Mali, and Gambia. It was something I loved as a child. Apparently, I always returned the akara package home without eating it. My excuse was that I did not want to share the food with my classmates in school. As a kid, I also used to draw a lot and would more than often not return home with my slate full of drawings of all sorts of objects. Sometimes I would use broomstick or a piece of wood to draw images on sand. It is a bit of a surprise that I am not an artist today. There is an event I always remember that illustrates my early incursions into art. In those days, the traditional sanitary system was a toilet consisting of a bucket. There were people whose job it was to carry and empty that bucket of effluent when filled. They were called Onye Buru in the Igbo dialect, whilst the Yorubas call them Agbekpo. I did not know where the waste was being disposed of, and the people who did the job always had a broom with them, whilst carrying the bucket on their head. All I knew was that the workers were prompt and efficient at what they did. History has it that during one class examination in my primary school days, I drew an Onye Buru Agbekpo. This particular Agbekpo I depicted held the broom and carried a bucket full of fuses on his head. I drew this with pride. I assume people who did the job were proud of it because they always did it with much energy and seeming enthusiasm. A naive mind as mine could be easily pardoned for having such an impression. Given the Z, with the janitors removed the sanitary bucket and washed and sanitized the toilet area. My artwork did cause quite some stir. As it happened, turned out to be extremely impressionable and popular, surprisingly winning me an art prize in the school. Chapter 2, Enugu. In 1956, our family was blessed with another baby girl, Caroline Edosa, and we continued to live in Aba till 1958, the year my brother, Lucky Osaide, was born. By then, my father was already working with the Federal Ministry of Trade and Industry as an artisan. Although his primary profession was carpentry, he had demonstrated versatility as a handyman. Hence, he was deployed to handle other technical aspects in the ministry. In 1958, the government transferred him to Enugu, and he, therefore, decided to relocate the family there. Enugu, like Aba, is in the southeastern part of Nigeria. Two Igbo words, Enu and Ugu, derive the name Enugu, which means top of the hill or mountain, obviously denoting the city, rolling hills and valley. Enugu was named after Enugu Nwo, under which coal was discovered. That is why Enugu is most known for coal. The city has a satellite settlement called Nike, which is popular because of the existence of the lake named after it, Nike Lake. Nike was present since the era of the Atlantic slave trade, and it was through slave trading that the Nike people acquired most of their land, which was largely unsettled. The Nike people used slave as a defense strategy, placing slave camps at the edge of their territories so that it was harder for enemies to access the freeborn. In 1903, the Europeans contracted British Australian geologist Albert Ernest Kittrell to explore Enugu for mineral resources, and that effort at exploration yielded fruit in 1909, when coal was discovered at the now legendary Woody Hills. The discovery of coal led to the design and construction of the Eastern Railway line to be able to move the resource from Enugu to Port Harcourt for export by sea. It was a no-brainer for the British that Enugu had to be developed, and that was exactly what they did. They went on to declare it the capital of the Eastern region after Nigerian independence in 1960. After previously served as the administrative capital of the region from 1938 till independence. I will never forget that evening in 1958 when we traveled to Enugu from Aba. I was 7 years old, and it was perhaps the most interesting experience I've ever had in my young life. We went by train, an equivalent of a business class, because it was a semi-private coach. My father had booked us on the train about 2 weeks to our departure for space contingencies. Since the whole family was relocating and we were going with all our belongings. That day, as I got on the train with Mom, Dad, and siblings, Lizzie, Taye, Caroline, and Lucky, I recall feeling a rush of childlike excitement with a tingling sense of adventure. The journey lasted a whole day, with the train stopping at different towns along the route. At each stop, we would come out of the train to buy things like sugarcane and other cosmetics, take a look around the terminus, and then return inside the train. As the journey continued, it was a coal-fired train, I remember. When we finally arrived in Enugu, the bells of the train filled the air, noise, perhaps to others, but to my young ears, they sounded like music, an unforgettable journey indeed. The almost perfect precursors to a life of countless voyages, many decades ahead. Since then, I have seen the world far beyond the city of coal, in planes flying above continents, in trains gliding on magnetic levitation in Europe, North America, and many parts of the world, observing nature and man's design, remembering at times that first train ride I took with my family from Aba to the coal city as a starry-eyed 7-year-old boy, clueless as to what lays ahead. Life in Ogu. The first place we lived was in Ogu, New Layout, near the Dane College of Technology. We stayed at number 2 Danfodio Street, parallel to College Road. I believe the road is still there today. While we lived at Danfodio Street, Ogui New Layout, my father worked at Ekulu Pottery Industry. Ekulu, right after Eva Valley, about 7 miles from our house. Ekulu Pottery Industry is now called the Project Development Institute, PRODER. During the Nigerian Civil War, it was known as the Biafran Research and Production, BRAP. The PRODER talk came at the end of the war. When we first arrived at Enugu, my parents enrolled me at a school nearest to our home. The school was St. Mary Primary School, Unwani, and had 2 locations. One was the Lower Nidida for primary 1 to 3, and the other was the Upper Mbago for primary 4 to 6. After my primary 3 at Ndida, I was transferred to Mbago, which was near the Catholic Seminary School, to commence primary 4. Before Nigerian independence, my school would organize marching parades for various government officials during certain events. I have fond memories of living in Ogwe as a child. Within a year of arriving in Enugu, I had joined the local children dance group. I particularly also remember the gratifying sense of community and laborliness. The Christmas season was always a lively affair where people from different places would go feasting in their neighbor's house. And the atmosphere was always peaceful and happy. People opened their doors and hearts, cooked rice and stew, and invited whosoever was interested to come and feast. Another remarkable thing is that during the Christmas festivities, different masquerades like Ekbo, Ejionu, Ulaga, Mmo, Agbada, Agaba, and many others danced around town, entertaining merrymakers. A young merrymaker, I remember going around with our masquerade masks and people gifting us coins, pennies, or toro, 3-penny coin, and other gifts. The youngsters to play masquerade were always selected through a dancing competition. The best dancer who emerged after a dancing competition wore the marks. I always won the competition, and therefore always wore the marks. And danced with other children. What a lot of people found intriguing was that as a Benin boy, I always won the Igbo dance competitions, and many others, many often gave me money in appreciation of my skills. There was a particular Christmas we decided to venture outside our domain of Ogul and went towards Coal Camp, another neighborhood. There was a myth that the big masquerades used to pin themselves using utomokbo or juju charm in those days. When such big masquerade ventured out, people would run helter-skelter, and there would be confusion everywhere. So we, little fries, always looked out for those big boys and stayed clear of their path. On this good day, we were dancing, and my liegemen, who used to hold the rope, and those in charge of the ogene mental gun, were busy hitting at it as we danced and scared the women and other children. Suddenly, I realized that the liegeman was no longer holding the rope tied to my waist. I also realized that the ogene was not sounding anymore, and I tried to imagine what could be going on. Instinctively, I looked up and saw a massive masquerade coming towards me. Nobody told me before I yanked my marks off and ran into the crowd, making me a laughingstock for the very women my gang and I had been scaring. The women had a good laugh as I took off like a cheater. Luckily, I found safety in one of the houses nearby. Ekulu. In 1960, another daughter, Ayodele, was added to the family, and my father decided we should move to Ekulu, which was where his workplace was located. The Federal Ministry of Trade and Industry had deployed him to Ekulu Pottery Industry, EPI, as an assistant technical officer. EPI specialized in making different things, especially pots and other wares from clay. Initially, Dad used to ride his bicycle from Ugwi layout to Ekulu. That was a distance of more than 7 miles, about 10 kilometers. After a while, he got a place at the Ekulu village, and then we relocated from Ugwi layout to Ekulu. My younger sister, Ayodele, was born shortly before we left Ogui for Ekulu. Our place of residence at Ogui layout was similar to the house we lived in Aba. In those days, it was the norm to have so many people renting one building and sharing. They built identical houses with courtyards that were shared. But things were slightly different at Ekulu. Our new home was on the hilly side of the neighborhood. The building had 2 rows of about 7 rooms each, facing the other with a long courtyard. In the middle and at the end were facilities like the kitchen, the bathroom, and the toilets. My parents rented the first 2 rooms on both sides of the building, facing each other. So, Our family had 4 rooms in total, and then the courtyard was ours to take care of. Close to our home was River Ekulu, a 25-kilometer long river that was the largest water body in Enugu. From there, we got all the water for domestic use. Customarily, all the children in the environs fetched water from a river. It was always a tough exercise, especially returning from the stream with a bucket of water on our head, climbing the steep hill, but we had fun doing it. Children did try to stay out of mischief, but we are not always successful, as one can imagine. And I remember, if you misbehave, one of the ways you were punished was to be sent to the stream to fetch 5 buckets of water. Going up and down the hill 5 times was definitely enough punishment for any erring child. Immediately after the stream was Ekulu Pottery Industry, where Dad worked. It probably took about 15 minutes to walk from home to his office, and when he chose to use his bicycle, it was 5 minutes. When he chose to cycle, which was almost all the time, the challenge was with returning home. He had to push the bicycle all the way up the hill, as the hill was too steep for cycling. In hindsight, I often wonder why he did that when he could have just walked down and walked back. It was always easy for him to ride down the hill, but it was always an arduous task pushing the bicycle up the hill daily. It was also interesting to observe the coal miners. They used to ride their bicycle from Iva Valley to Ekulu on their way to work as the collier mines. Like an accurate alarm clock, we knew when the miners were going to pass at about 6 a.m. when they closed work and were on their way back in the late afternoons. We would see them pushing their bikes up the hill to go home as well. The 2 prominent coal mines at the time were Ekulu Mines and Oyema Mines. The mine code was trolleyed out from the mines by specially designed trolleys, which rolled on rail tracks laid right into the mine. The coal was thereafter transferred to cable buckets that were conveyed by overhead cables from Enugu to Oji River Town in present-day Anambra State, where a power generating station provided uninterrupted electricity supply to the region in those days. It was an exciting experience that one could never forget. Sometimes I wonder what happened to all of that. I would have thought that by now coal exploration, exploitation, and utilization would have been modernized for the economic benefits of Nigeria, considering how important the mineral resource was. Coal is still very much present in Nigeria, but oil has been a distraction. Every occupation has its hazards, and mineral mining is not an exception. I recall occasions that a coal mine collapsed. The coal miners used to dig horizontally into the mine, and as they dug, they would support the top of the tunnel with strong wooden logs and battens. But occasionally, those supports would collapse, and the miners would be trapped in the mine for days. Sometimes they survived till they were rescued, and at other times they died. In the later instances, there will be a lot of mourning around the locality. Needless to say, due to the abundant presence of coal, the inhabitants of Iva Valley were predominantly coal miners. It is often said that where there are people, there are opportunities. Seeing the large number of miners and appreciating the probable need to refuel their laboring bodies, during the day, my mother took to a food business. It was not that a good initiative, because the business was meeting an identified need in our locality. On the other hand, the proceeds from it augmented and supported my father Miguel's salary for our family upkeep. This was necessary as the synergy of income kept us in school and kept the home front running. And we, the children, understood this clearly. This understanding also informed the division of labor in our home. Whenever I returned from school, I would take my father's old bicycle and ride to Ogbete Market in Enugu town, some 7 miles away from home, to buy groceries and other necessity for my mom. To make life easier, Mom has introduced me to all our customers in the market, so I got the best prices from traders. For carrying the purchases, I had a sack permanently positioned in the back carrier of the bicycle. Once I finished at the market and got back home, I would grind the pepper, tomatoes, and onions using the traditional grinder stone. By morning, my mother will cook rice and make stew, which she scooped into 2 separate big bowls. After my mother scooped the rice, there was always this epic moment that we, the children, looked forward to. I suppose almost every family has those. I laugh now, thinking of those times as we eagerly await for the remnant rice grain stuck to the bottom of the pot. As soon as she was done scooping, we would fall over one another, struggling to scoop and eat as much as possible. When the food war ended, I would carry the bowl of rice on my head, while my mother carried the stew bowl on hers, heading for the mines. As soon as we reached the mines, I would bring down the bowls from my head and run back home to prepare for school. In those days, all families cooked their meal using firewood, as there were no gas cooker or kerosene stove. My sister Lizzie, our older relatives, Others who live with us and I were tasked with going to the bush at weekends to fetch firewood for the family use. This was how everyone was involved in sustaining the home. And that is why today I can hold my own when it comes to cooking. In our days at Ekulu, there was no Trans-Ekulu Road. The Ekulu Road then terminated at the coal mines. Osariemen mine to the right and Ekulu mine to the left. The present Trans-Ekulu was a hilly jungle that was cleared to give room for the existing road. The hills and valley were undoubtedly of great economic importance to the eastern region and the country at large. It is a pity that the area has been largely abandoned. Nowadays, I am engulfed with nostalgia anytime I drive through the Trans-Ekulu Highway, and I sometimes stop to look down the valley at the relic of the Osariemen Lines administrative building, still standing there after 60 years. I remember how we sold rice in that same building to hard-working miners, schooling and Iver Valley. Growing up, my father could not afford to buy us school sandals, and he did not own a vehicle either. It was commonplace for children to go to school barefoot those days, so I did the same. But when the road from Ekulu to Iver Valley got hard, it became impossible to walk on the tar road under the sun, as the sun-smitten tar scorched the sole of our feet badly. So we found the bush path to take to school every day. There was always the risk of getting injured by thorns and other sharp objects because our feet were unprotected, but that never bothered us. Being shoeless was our reality, and only a few people could afford to wear shoes. My father bought us shoes only during Christmas, and even then, you could only wear them for Christmas. By the next Christmas, you would have overgrown the shoes. It took gaining college admission in 1965 for my father to buy school shoes for me, and that was only because it was an essential requirement. Somehow, we understood that there was more to life than shoes and other material things. Our happiness was never determined by whether or not we had shoes or anything else for that matter. I guess that as children, our values tended to be right. We were not prisoners of materialism, even of nearly essential ones. Life was never about what we wore or did not wear, and we lived well with all the lack. When we moved to Ekulu, I changed schools to St. Patrick Primary School, Iver Valley. The school was the nearest good one, about 4 miles away, and from home we trekked to Iver Valley and back, a walk that took us about an hour each every day. St. Patrick was a Catholic school, and because of that, I attended the Catholic church in the community, and unsurprisingly, was indoctrinated into Catholic tenets. The parish priest at that time was a right man, Reverend Father Gregory. When it was time for my baptism in the Catholic Church, I passed all requisite tests and insisted that Father Gregory was the one who baptized me. In the Catholic Church, one is expected to choose the name of a saint at a baptismal name, and I decided on Gregory for mine. That was how I named myself Gregory, even though my parents had christened me Sunday at birth, being that I was born on Sunday. I did not want to retain that name. Many years after, my mom and siblings occasionally tease me with the name Sunday. After baptism, the next step was for me to become confirmed in the Catholic Church. After confirmation, there were a lot of exams and lessons I had to see through. But in the end, I passed and was confirmed as Victor. My next goal was to become a mass server, but that did not work out as I was unsuccessful at the exam. My father was a traditional worshipper at the time, and my mother automatically aligned with him. But as a child, you had to be an active Christian to be a pupil at the school we attended. So, we never really bothered about our father religion. My father religion. Jackson Igbinosara was a tough man, which is not surprising, considering he had to struggle from an early age. I believe struggles shape and toughen people. No one needs to suffer. But when people find themselves in difficult circumstances, it often helps them to dig and tap into hitherto unknown and unimaginable reservoirs of strength and faith within them. The Benin people mainly relied on their belief and practice of traditional religion back then. My father was no different. Ever since he was a little houseboy for his granduncle, he was a traditional religion practitioner. Everywhere he lived, he built a shrine. From Ondo to Aba to Enugu, he had many idols and totems of worship. From when I was young as a child, I remember we always had a room full of shrines. I grew up seeing totems and I dabbled in them from an early age, laying a foundation for possible full participation later on. When I was in primary school, I occasionally tied a red or white cloth around my body, put cowrie on it, and used this to scare my friend away and fellow people. Out of curiosity, I sometimes tried to summon our ancestors and commune with them. My siblings and I were usually excited when my father made animal sacrifices. The only part of any animal I always requested for was the head. So much so that when my father killed a tortoise, I asked for his head. With all the sacrifices, it was obvious my father was neck deep into a traditional religion, that it was an essential part of him. If anyone ever told me that when my father would renounce his traditional belief, I would have told them to have another thing. But that was exactly what happened. It was in 1962, and we were still living in Ekulu, 2 years after Nigeria became independent from colonial rule, and Enugu had become the capital of the eastern region. My father fell seriously ill and was taken to various hospitals, but to no effect. We even took him to a traditional medicine man who employed all kinds of charm in an attempt to get him healed, but he never got better. So we returned home and resignedly waited for his death. As God will have it, a relative visited us at that period and told us about a Christian evangelistic crusade happening at a school field in Ogwe. According to our relative, the organizers were asking people to bring their sick for healing. There we were, a family devoted to the traditional ways, asked to take our patriarch to a foreign god for recovery. Some would have said abomination, but desperation was upon us, and we, like a drowning man, would grab any lifeline thrown to him. We had tried all means possible. There was no harm in trying this one too. So we grabbed it with both hands. We put my father in a taxi and we went to the crusade ground. When we got there, we laid him on a mat because he could neither stand nor sit. To our surprise, the crusade field was teeming with people. Our initial assumption was that we would have an opportunity to consult with a pastor or a minister one-on-one. Just like in a hospital, but this was not the case. Instead, when the crusade ended, we were told to go home without having spoken with any minister. Needless to say, we were disappointed. We carried my father back home with a long face and laid him in the section of the room we had carved out for him. Dejected, we all went to bed, oblivious of the exciting turn of things that was about to take place. In the wee hour of the morning, at about 2 a.m., my father woke up feeling like a young man. His first thoughts were that he was dead and we were only reliving his youth. Suddenly, he felt he could walk and see things like the picture on the wall. He stood up, walked to my mother's room, and knocked at her door. This was a man who had not been able to stand for months, could barely eat, and had been on liquid only. At the sound of the knock, my mother, probably thinking it was one of us, the children, opened her door, only to see him standing. Frightened out of her wits, she jumped outside. Then, in a panic, she ran to her room and woke us up to come and take a look. She was sure it was a ghost. We all ran to where he was standing, surprise and confusion evident on our faces. He did not say much. He only asked for food. He had to ask twice before our brain could process his request. We went quietly to the kitchen and prepared the rice and pepper soup he requested for. After serving the food, we sat down and watched him eat everything up. Like a scientist observing his specimen under a microscope. We kept looking at him fixedly until the morning light streamed in. That morning, he decided to go to work as he has been absent for 4 months. We were confused. We did not know how to react to this. And being the head of the family, we could not pose resistance to him. Anyway, since his office was only a walking distance, when he was ready, my siblings and I escorted him. When we got to his workplace, his co-workers' reaction were similar to my mother, Brick. They ran away. It took a brave colleague who approached him to allay the other fears. At lunchtime, we returned home, and then my father called us together to inform us of the important work he had to do in the house, and that he will be going to church, the crusade ground, that evening. Going to church? Of course. This raised many questions in our mind, but we waited to see how things would unfold. The Christ Apostolic Church, CAC, was the ministry that organized the crusade we took him to. CAC was known for its evangelistic crusade, and if not that its founder, Apostle Joseph Babalola, had died in 1959, my father would have met him at the crusade. That evening, we followed him to church, and when they called for testimonies, he raised his hand. During his testimonies, he declared that the God whom hid him was the God he would serve. He was prayed for, and after the prayer, he confessed to the entire church that he had been serving idols all his life. He told the large jubilant crowd about the section of his room dedicated to the totems and symbols, and that he wanted to discard everything. He pleaded with the church workers to come with holy water to nullify everything and cleanse all the charm, spiritual effect, and pray for him and the family. Break it. After the crusade, a day was fixed, and the church leaders came to our home and prayed, as my father had requested. After the prayers, a pickup vehicle was hired, whose open back was filled with bags of shams of various names. My father called all of us together and told us he had served those idols all his life because they were what he inherited as a Benin man. He pointed out that all the charms and images were in the house with him, but none could save him when he was dying, until that other God did. He was throwing them all away. And none of his children should ever serve or worship idols. He turned to me and told me that as his first son, if he had died serving those idols, I would have naturally inherited them. He wanted me to witness him discard them. I am not sure if my father thought of any repercussions that may trial his decisions, but later events would prove otherwise. Iva Valley in Enugu State is famous for several things, including the Iva Valley coal mine, where 21 miners were shot dead and another 51 injured in what has come to be known as the Iva Valley Massacre of 1949. But that afternoon, in 1962, my father and I were not visiting the valley because of this history. Rather, we are searching for Mirioka, a stream located in the valley axis, a shadow stream whose velocity of flow could uproot a human being. We got to the stream with a truckload of charm and juju totems. On alighting, my father began to throw his juju paraphernalia into the water while praying to his new God, stressing that he was giving those things up, serving and casting off all generational relationship and ties of covenant that he had with the charm and juju. Out of youthful exuberance, I volunteered to help my father in this activity, but he declined, saying he did not want me involved. I guess he did consider a possible backlash. As I watched him throw the totems into the stream, something strange happened that I can never forget. One of the images that he was disposing of was called Oyo. Oyo was huge and grotesque. It looked like the head of a cow. I remember him retrieving that Oyo from a bag and throwing it into the fast-flowing river. Surprisingly, the image came back upstream, defying the stream velocity. It came back on its own with a fairy force to the land. I was scared like everyone else. My father threw the Yoho image again and again while praying. It kept coming back. At a point, I took off and ran up the hill. A weaker man would have given up at that point, but not my father. He prayed and prayed and kept throwing the image into the stream, and eventually it flowed away. That was how he got rid of his charms and gave his life to Christ. This marked the beginning of a new phase in my family, and we began to worship at the Christ Apostolic Church in Ogwe, Enugu. We would trek from Ekulu to Ogwe, where the church was located, about 7 miles, 4.5 kilometers. This devotion included attending midweek services, which typically ended at about 8 p.m. and we'll still have to trek back to Ekulu, sometimes reaching home around 11 p.m. Regardless of the distance, my father's devotion was unflinching. Things, however, improved later when a church branch was established in Ekulu, which he was instrumental in achieving. We could now attend weekly service in Ekulu and left Sunday services for the main church in Ogun. This became the foundation of my faith. Chapter 3. Nigeria in the 50s and 60s. The late 1950s to the mid 1960s were the best times I experienced as a Nigerian. We are still living in eastern Nigeria, and then people lived in harmony without paying attention to ethnic identity. During the festive period, families will cook in abundance and open their doors, and strangers could walk in, eat and drink and move on. Nigeria was lovely, and nobody cared about where you came from. We related well, until, of course, the unfortunate incidents of the Nigerian Civil War. And all those gains we made in social networking was eroded. I grew up to see public tap flowing freely, and these taps were all over the place. There was the Public Work Department, PWD, that went around repairing roads with shovels and rakes, filling up potholes and keeping things clean. Then, in the east, where we were, there was Electricity Corporation of Nigeria, ECN, which provided us uninterrupted power supply. The rail transportation also worked. I remember the white men used to ride the boogie on the rail track, while the Nigerian workers powered the boogie mechanically. It was how the white men inspected the track to detect any problems and defects that required fixing. And if any was found, they were fixed promptly. Also, there was no crime at that time. If you ever heard about stealing, there were minor incidents by hungry people. As kids, we went to school on our own. There was never any fear of adoptions or kidnapping. Those were unheard of. There is a primary school experience I always remember. It was around 1959. I presume I was in primary 2 or 3. I had a friend, Okeke, whose father was a senior police officer. He was one of those privileged ones. After school, his parents would send the driver to pick him up. This day, it rained heavily. When the driver arrived, most of the other children had left. So, the driver suggested that I followed Okeke home and leave for home after the rain, which I did. When we got to Okeke's house, I was offered some food, and that posed the first problem for me because I was afraid of accepting me, since my parents had warned me against eating in other people's home. The second problem was that the fried yam and stew I was offered was incredibly tempting. The aroma was irresistible, and well, let's just say that it broke my weak resistance. I decided to accept the offer and prayed that my parents would forgive me. But things got complicated. After eating, Okeke stole his father's bottle of snap and brought it under the stairway for both of us to drink. I agreed with his plan and took a few shots of the snap. The alcoholic drink was not kind to me, as I got promptly drunk and slept right under that stairway. The scary part was nobody knew I was there, fast asleep. By the time my parents had become apprehensive and were frantically looking for me everywhere, everybody searched in vain. When I woke up, I knew I was in trouble. I am dead, I thought. I was convinced my parents were going to kill me when I eventually got home. I acted like something was wrong and faked a faint. Worried and perplexed, my parents rushed me to a nearby hospital where the doctor on duty checked me and informed them there was nothing wrong with me except that I had ingested much alcohol. On hearing this non-threatening news, my father hissed and walked away, leaving my mom and me in the hospital, quietly relieved that there was no significant health problem. I did not have to be told that some stroke of the cane awaited me whenever I recovered from my self-inflicted ill health. Talking about ethnic identity, people who lived away from their places of origin tended to get together and bond. They formed cultural unions, and in Enugu then, my father was at some point the president of the Benin Union. Coincidentally then, the Crown Prince of Benin Kingdom, King Akinzua, was the divisional officer in Enugu. He, therefore, was the patron of the Benin Union, and my father became good friends with him and worked very closely in the administration and growth of the Benin Union. Prince Akezua's first son, then called Eyenede, who is the present Oba Ewai of Benin, and I got admission into Edo College, Benin City, in 1965. So, on occasion, his father car would take us both to Benin after our holidays in Enugu. Though we were Beninese, living among other tribes, you could never tell the difference between a Benin and a non-Benin person. Different people from different parts of the country all just lived as a large community. It is sad what Nigeria has become, having so much division and ethnicity. People are becoming more and more distrustful of others, and there is a staggering inequity going on. Growing up, I never knew anything else other than being in Nigeria. Even though I lived in the East, I did not feel like an outsider. The Igbo man never told me once that I was not an Igbo. We visited each other's homes and ate together without even knowing ourselves. That was one Nigeria. We lived anywhere and you were welcomed everywhere. People were, in those days, very hospitable, particularly if you were not from their locality. That was the Nigeria I knew. But today, sadly, those in the age bracket of 30 to 40 years do not understand what Nigeria is, or what it was, or what it can possibly be. I doubt if we can start to stitch it up. The fragmentation is increasing by the day, and we need to face that reality. I've heard people say that unity is our strength and we need to stay united. But I think we should only stay united under terms different than what we have at the moment. That is my personal view. As a child, I frequently heard Nigerian revolutionaries like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Michael Okpara, Sam Ikoku, and Obafemi Awolowo speak about the great Nigeria of their dream and struggle. The most popular newspaper at the time was the Nigerian Outlook. My father plays pool a lot, so he bought many newspapers, and I will read them during my leisure time. Sam Ikoku brother, whose name I cannot recall, was a resident in our neighborhood. In the evening, he would often come out to laugh and joke around with other residents who would flock to his compound due to his brother's fame. There was a song he used to sing, and it went like this. The last federal election was a tug of war. The last federal election was a tug of war. Some people are trying to ruin Nigeria. Bukadaya ina kwana, ina gejia, ba kudaya. Bukadaya ina kwana, ina gejia, ba kudaya. I do not know what later became of this man, but in insight, this song shows that Nigeria has always been a country where the election was tumultuous. This election must have been during the colonial time, before independence, and it is perplexing that it was a wild one even then. It seems Nigeria has been disorganized from the start. Even though the First Republic emergence was not cohesive, some entities opposed the rulers, which led to the subsequent coup in 1966. Nigeria and colonialism. The colonial days were good. If we had remained longer under British rule, Nigeria would have been far better than it is today. I know many people who do not like my view, but it is a conviction I have. It does not mean colonialism in itself is good or should be encouraged, but it is plain reality. In those days, nobody was afraid of crime or armed robbery as they hardly took place. Houses hardly had fences, and nobody cared about building homes with high walls. Even the colonial masters never had fences around their houses and compounds. This changed after the British left Nigeria, when Nigeria's civil servants began taking things they should not and appropriating public properties to themselves. To cover their track, they started building high fences so nobody could see what they had in their compound. So, the truth is, in Nigeria, fences were not initially built for security. They were constructed to hide properties that people were acquiring inappropriately and had no explanation for. When this gradually became the norm, fast and curious minds were keen to know what was behind the fences, and that was how burglary and break-in started. During the colonial era, merit was the order of the day. People were hired based on it. Unarguably, the British had some selfish interests, but colonialism brought a lot of good people to us as a people. The British were developing a system. They implanted the procedures and standards as practice in their own country. In court, there was fair hearing. There was nothing like bribing the European judge. Admittedly, the British exploited us as a people, using our mineral resources to develop their country. But we still got tremendous good dividends from them. The British respected their domestic staff and did not treat Nigerians like slaves. Under colonial rule, things worked smoothly and efficiently. Nowadays, I hear people talk about how our culture was lost or destroyed because of colonialism, and I shake my head in disbelief. The truth is, when the British were here, they never stopped us from continuing with our culture. Rather, they encouraged us to express our culture. They planted churches, but never forced anyone to attend the services. It was our choice to attend or not. Some of the whites were indeed nasty and wicked, but generally, they treated Nigerians fairly. The memories I have of the colonial era are unequivocally positive. It was a time Nigerians had plenty of opportunities to enjoy Western education, and several people won scholarship that took them outside the shores of the country. I am a living product of such opportunities. I wish our independence has made us improve on the structures and institutions the British had left behind. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. On the contrary, destruction and deterioration of built institutions have been the order of the day. It is depressing to watch how things have degenerated since we took our governance. Civil war, displacement. In 1964, I finished from St. Patrick Primary School, Eva Valley, and in 1935, I got admission into 4 secondary schools: Edo College, Benin City; St. Patrick College, Asaba; Government College, Umuahia; and Dennis Memorial Grammar School, DMGS, Onitsha. My father felt that my siblings and I had scant knowledge about Benin, our people, and our culture, even though that is our place of origin. For that reason, he preferred that I choose Edo College, Benin, to aid my knowledge of our culture, customs, and traditions. In those days, the school academic year started in January and ended in December. Hence, by the time I finished primary school in December 1964, I was ready for secondary school the very next month. My destination, Edo College, Benin City. With my admission into Edo College in January 1965, I moved to Benin as a boarding student on the school premises. My elder sister, Lizzie, had already gotten admission into Etikoku College in Onitsha. By then, there was rising tension in the Nigerian political space. The Western region mainly seems to have caught fire as the talks between Obafemi Awolowo and Akintola had set the region ablaze, with the federal government not particularly eager to fix things. After all, the situation meant the Northern People Congress, the party in power, could have a smoother sail to win the next election. The political space was on a free fall. 1966, the year after I resumed Edo College, was going to be significant in Nigerian political history. The country was 6 years post-independence and was still figuring out how best to stabilize its newfound freedom, despite echoes of disgruntlement in some quarters. Suddenly, on January 15th of the year, a military coup d'etat was executed to oust the sitting federal government. Nigeria was never going to remain the same again. The coup was conducted by a group of young, rebellious soldiers led by Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogu and Major Emmanuel Ifeanjuna. In that coup, 22 people were killed, including Tafawa Balewa, the Prime Minister. Ahmadu Bello, Premier of the Northern Region; Samuel Ladoke Akintola, Premier of the Western Region; senior government officials and senior army officers and their wives. The first military head of state emerged in the person of Major General Johnson Thompson Nwanukwe Aguni Ironsi of Igbo extraction. 6 months after the first coup, In July 1966, a counter coup was carried out by young Nigerian soldiers who felt the earlier coup was tribally motivated. This counter coup led to the emergence of young Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon of Northern extraction as the next military head of state. The accused were the evils. After the coup, a series of genocidal attacks began in the northern part of Nigeria. Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, the Eastern Region charismatic military governor, in 1966, Ojukwu would later become the leader of the breakaway Republic of Biafra from 1967 to 1970. Directed all Easterners to leave the northern region and all non-Easterners to leave the eastern region. The eastern region was made up of places east of River Niger, present-day southeast Nigeria, plus rivers, Bayelsa, and Cross River states. Sir, there is a plan to attack you and your family. You better leave. Those words were enough to jar my father from his indifference at the start of the Nigerian Civil War. He had initially regarded Colonel Ojukwu directive asking non-Easterners to leave the eastern region as a joke. This was in June 1966. For the first time, we realized we were not Easterners and our family had to leave. All the years we had stayed at Aba and Enugu did not count. It was painful as tribal and ethnic crack manifested for the first time in Nigeria. Suddenly, there was no Nigeria again. You were either Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Tiv, someone from Benin, or any other tribe. A problem still rearing its head in today's Nigeria. We had lived in the eastern region for many years, and it was the only home we knew. No one had ever treated us as an outsider. Benin was not even home to us like Enugu was at that time. We never saw ourselves as Benin people, but as Igbo. We could all speak Igbo fluently. My father was the only one who refused to learn it. He spoke Benin till the day he died. However, we were lucky to escape with our life, as we could have been killed and our properties acquired. If not for my father's friend, who warned us about the attack to attack us, others were not so lucky. My parents gave birth to 5 children, one in Aba, Elizabeth, Greg, Taye, Caroline, and Lucky. At Enugu, we had Ayo, Festus, born in 1962, and Bosse, born in 1965, the year I started secondary school. So, by the time they arrived in Benin, they had 8 children. I remember returning to Enugu from Benin in April 1965 for my first term school holiday. As I arrived home, I was greeted with celebrations and jubilations. Initially, I thought it was about my return home, After my first term as a college student, I was ready to regale everybody with my experience. This was not to be, as I began to hear the wailing of a newborn baby, which, as it turns out, was the reason for the jubilation. My mother's last daughter, Bosse, had just been born. I joined in the celebration and could not be separated from the tiny little brother in the cradle. For the rest of my first term holiday, I was glued to my baby sister. I wanted to feed her, rock her, and when she was crying, and sing to amuse and pacify her, we were virtually inseparable. And as she grew, the bond between us was strong till date. Nobody. Today, Bosse is a successful entrepreneur and lives in the United States of America with her amiable husband and her 3 grown-up sons. She also became my mother's pet daughter, and Bosse will never do enough for Mama until my mother died in 2019 at the age of 100. We had no close family ties in Benin, except my father's grand-uncle, Chief Osariemen, the Osariemen of Benin. His children and grandchildren had always been an important figure in my father's life. He was the one who finally bailed my family out. Chief Osariemen accommodated my parents and siblings in 2 rooms in his house at Iwenoga Street. My parents and siblings became refugees or internally displaced persons in Benin. At this time, of course, I was at the boarding house in Edo College and only came home to join the rest of my family during the holidays. It was a hard-pressed position to be in, but my parents' tenacity came through again. They stayed positive and healthy. They moved on with life, coping as best as they could with a difficult situation occasioned by displacement from the East. At Edo College, life was different for me. We were somewhat shielded from the drums of war and only heard news about what was going on. But Ojukwu ordered was a blessing in disguise for me. Before that time, my family rarely visited me in school. With the family relocation to Benin, it became easier for them to come visiting. Hence, Dad occasionally came on visiting days, while the whole family visited on prize-giving day or during the end of the year activities. My elder sister, Lizzie, got admitted into school in Saple to continue her education. Taye soon joined me in Edo College in 1967 when the rest of the children were enrolled in the government primary school near our temporary abode. While fleeing from the eastern region, my father had to abandon the house he built in Aba. But this was not unique to my father. The Igbos in Benin, in turn, had also abandoned their houses and fled to the eastern region. The constraints were there, and since lands and houses, as essential as they are, cannot be uprooted, people had to find a way around the dismal circumstances. Eventually, to mitigate losses, landlords across the divide arranged swaps. So, if one had a house in the east and someone from the east had a house in Benin, they agreed and swapped. Eventually, My parents swapped with someone, and by so doing, we finally got a place in Benin, number 8, Globadia Street, New Benin. From Chief Ehobamie's house, we moved to our new home on Globadia Street. When the Civil War ended, everybody wanted their houses back. So, we gave up the Globadia Street house, and my father also recovered his house in Aba. My father eventually sold the house in Aba, and with time, we got our own place, number 19, Waifo Street, Benin City. At 16, there were many things I could have hoped for to be doing. And living through war was not one of them. Ready or not, I was caught in the middle when the Nigerian Civil War started in 1967. Most Westerners went about it with an air of neutrality during the war because people believed the war was between the Easterners and Northerners. We, the Midwesterners, would have aligned with the East, but since Ojukwu had asked us to leave, we felt we did not owe him our sympathy. People in the Midwest state detested Ojukwu's action. Even as a child, his directive affected me because my parents were set back by years. We had always felt we were all Nigerians. All of a sudden, that was not the case. The Midwest state remained in the bubble of neutrality until we woke up one day to the news that Biafran soldiers had overrun the Midwest. I was still in Edo College then, and the whole event was quite dramatic. One day, we saw big lanky black northern soldiers. The next day, we are seeing Igbo soldiers everywhere, Biafran soldiers in Biafran uniform, and our citizenship changed as quickly as this, from Nigerians to Biafrans. The Biafran soldiers had gone up to Ore, heading towards Lagos, before the Nigerian army intercepted and began to fight with them. For 6 weeks, Midwest State was under the occupation of the Biafran army. And in that period, schools were shut down and students were asked to go home. This war was our 1967 version of the 2020 COVID-19 situation. Just like this generation remember the coronavirus pandemic for years, my generation will never forget the Nigerian Civil War. More so, looking at the vices children were exposed to during that period of occupation, massive looting, Biafrans and Nigerians breaking into shops, soldiers having away food, provisions, and so on. When the Nigerian army came to liberate at least Benin City, it was not pleasant. Innocent Igbo men and women were shot and murdered in cold blood. This was when I first witnessed bloodshed. I still cannot explain how I felt watching that right in Benin City as a child. I had gone with other people to look for something to loot. It was a bit too much for a 16-year-old to experience. Amidst this event, the new channels were at watch with reports of the Biafran being dislodged from here and there. We also kept hearing about the feat of Black Scorpion, Adenkule, and Olusegun Obasanjo. Lots of propagandas were flying about. The East was showing very gory pictures of malnutrition, genocide, and children carrying harm. It was all very horrible. That fate in Benin. After we relocated to Benin, my father connected with the Benin branch of the Christ Apostolic Church, being that he was already an elder in the Enugu branch. The church immediately made him an elder there also. Despite that, he had an encounter with a young man that would have an impact on his spiritual life. Occasionally, he took us to Bata Shoe Company to buy us school shoes. The salesman was a slim, tall gentleman who enjoyed chatting with the customers while he attended to them. This gentleman would take our feet size, get the shoes, and try them on us, while he jovially discussed with my father. The discussion cut across various subjects, but clearly his favorites were those related to spirituality and the Bible. He became very friendly with my dad and would explore passages in the Bible with him as if my father was unaccustomed to the scriptures. My father loved him and was excited about having someone, a Benin man like himself, whom he could discuss Christianity with. To appreciate this, the context of their relationship was a Benin society that has not entirely opened up to Christianity. Being a Christian in Benin was unusual at that time. Traditional religion and practices were advocated for, and practices like polygamy and idol worship were standard. My father's refusal to accept these made his larger family reject him. It was a complicated situation for him. In light of the status quo, the Bata salesman was indeed like a breath of fresh air to my father. They became like brothers every day while having a family devotion as early as 6 a.m. The shoe salesman would ride his bicycle to our house to join us for morning devotion. He would pray, praise, and share scriptures with us. That went on for a long time. He became close to our entire family and shared a lot of good times with us. Months later, when our church, Christ Apostolic Church, was having its annual convention, my father requested that the church allow his young friend to preach in one of those sessions. It took some convincing, but the leadership of the church, headed by one Reverend Egagbo, eventually agreed. The young salesman was happy when he was informed he would be preaching. I remember he came in a white locally tailored suit and preached his heart's that day, holding the audience captive. That was how the young man, who would later be globally known as Archbishop Bensi Idausa, got his first preaching opportunity in a church. After that first preaching experience, Bensi Idausa eventually went on to become a world-renowned charismatic Pentecostal minister. He founded the Church of God Mission International in 1968, and is credited as the father of the Pentecostalism in Nigeria. Bensi Idausa became a regular guest at our house. When he eventually pioneered the Church of God Mission, my father joined him and gave his time, energy, skill, and possession, including his motorcycle, to the new church. I remember my father, by himself, made 12 executive chairs that he donated to the Church of God mission, which the Archbishop proudly arranged on the church altar when an American evangelist, T.L. Osborne, came to the Church of God mission. My father, now an elder in the church, was one of those who worked closely with him. On the 13th day of November 1976, during the subsequent visit of Evangelist T.L. Osborne, Dad was formally ordained into the work of ministry. My father was a passionate Christian. He would memorize various Bible passages as he could not read. Nothing less, things change, people change. I cannot say specifically what it was, but it seems something got into my father. Perhaps it was pressure from his extended family. They relentlessly demanded that he should marry a second wife because in Benin tradition, polygamy was the norm. Men were encouraged to marry more than one wife because monogamy was seen as a disadvantage to a man. Monogamy was like putting all of one's eggs in a basket. What happened if the basket is stolen or it falls to the ground? That was the people's reasoning. And the average Benin man was warned by friends and family never to take that chance. My father began to reflect on it, and after a while, his resistance broke. He decided to marry another wife. This put tremendous pressure on his relationship with my mother. They neared a breaking point. When that happened, the Archbishop examined the position of both of them and saw things from my mother's perspective. It was not a case of him taking side. Prince Dausa was a man who based his judgment on his interpretation of the scriptures, and that was what he did in my parents' case. In defiance to the Archbishop's stance, my father left the church and went back to idol worship. Years later, in 1979, he and my mother separated and he married another woman who had 3 children for him: Mercy, Ernest, and Osariemen. This new wife was heavily involved in idol worship with Dad. Interestingly, it seemed my father never really let go of Christianity. At the center of his shrine was his large Bible. At the same time, despite the unease we felt about his religious truths, my father prayed for us with the scriptures whenever we went home on holiday. I refused to have anything to do with his idol worship. I believe it was a contradiction because that day, when he threw the totem and idols in the river at Enugu, he said he was doing it so I would not inherit those fetish things. As the years went by, he repeatedly told me that he knew I would throw away all the idols when he died. I never replied him because I knew he was correct. As soon as he died and we buried him, I sought out a respected man of God in town. I told him that my father was dead and I wanted to burn all the idol objects of worship. The pastor came to our house, entered the shrine, and brought all the idols outside and burned them. But anoint, then he anointed the whole house and consecrated the compound. Meanwhile, while alive, my father had built another house where his second wife resided. At his demise, I moved her out of the house because it was mine by inheritance. I got one of my younger brothers to live there and made it a general transit home for any family member visiting Benin. Section 2. Benin and a life-changing scholarship. Chapter 4. Benin and Edo College. Benin. Oba Ewaye the Great, 1440 to 1473, the 12th Oba in the line, expanded the already thriving Benin Kingdom territories to surrounding regions. But the kingdom was not always called Benin. During Oba Ewaye's time, its administrative center was referred to as Ubini. Ubini was later corrupted to Bini by the Shekiris, Urobo, and Edo, who lived together at the center. Around 1485, when the Portuguese arrived in an expedition led by João Afonso de Aveiro, they began to pronounce Bini as Bini. The new name stuck, and the center became known as Benin City. Ewaye, who became king through a violent coup against his brother, Waifoku, is credited with reforming the kingdom Benin political structure. He set it on a path of territorial dominance and turned it into a city-state from a military fortress built by the Ogisos, protected by moats and walls. But Benin had a history of prosperity before Ewaye. Excavations reveal that it was already flourishing around 1200 to 1300 CE. Nevertheless, Ewaye certainly brought a golden age with its territorial expansion efforts, consolidating the Oba power and creating an administrative structure for the empire. After the Afex expedition to Benin in 1553, the British could not turn their backs on Benin. The lucrative trading and exporting of ivory, palm oil, pepper, and later slaves drove them to explore Benin more and more. With time, those who visited in the 16th and 19th century could not but return to England with fascinating tale of the Great Benin, a city of noble building ruled by a powerful king. A Dutch illustrator aptly depicted the ancient Benin in a publication by historians and geographers. Ofedapa Naukelg Besuvi the Afinskasek Wellstein Description of Africa was published in Amsterdam in 1668. The work states about the royal palace of the Oba. The king court is square and located on the right-hand side of the city, as no one enters it through the gate of Goton. It is about the same size as the city of Harlem and entirely surrounded by a special wall, comparable to the one which encircled the town. It is divided into many magnificent palaces, houses, and apartments of the courtiers, and comprises beautiful and long square with galleries about as large as the exchange at Amsterdam. The buildings are of different sizes, however, resting on wooden pillars from top to bottom, lined with copper cast on which pictures of their war exploits and battles are engraved. All of them are being very well maintained. Most of the buildings within this court are covered with palm leaves instead of with square planks, and every roof is adorned with a small spread tower on which casted copper bells are standing, being very artfully sculptured and lifelike with their wing spread. When Benin was at its strongest, it dominated trade along the entire coastline, from the western Niger Delta through Lagos to the kingdom of the Great Accra, modern-day Ghana. This is why the coastline was named the Bight of Benin. The present-day Republic of Benin, formerly Dahomey, decided to choose the Bight name as its country name. Benin Kingdom was all conquering. The Western Igbo, Ijo, Ichekiri, Ika, Isoko, Urobo, plus the Eastern Nigerian tribe of Ondo, Ekiti, Mayugbo, and Ijebu were all ruled by the kingdom. Benin also conquered what eventually became the city of Lagos hundreds of years before the British took over in 1851. However, there is a part of Benin history that was as prominent as its territorial dominance. Its spirituality seeped in traditional religion, occultism, and superstitions. Shrines hanging on doorposts, fetish paraphernalia, people wearing wrappers with chalk mark all over their bodies, sacrifices composed of butchered chicken, coconut, and lots more were some sites that would have welcomed first-time visitors to Benin in the yesteryears. At the time, the Benin were still embittered by the British rule in the exile of Oba Ovurame. So, they relied solely on their ancestral belief and did not give room for the white man religion. Ovurame was the king of Benin Kingdom from 1888 to 1897. He would have ruled longer, but for breathing intrusion, which led to his being exiled to Calabar in 1897. The Beninese quickly learned the importance of having a strong union or body, so they formed or joined the Ogboni and Owegbe Society. While the Ogboni Society has its origin in the western region of Nigeria, its membership extended to the Midwest states, including Benin. The Owegbe, on the other hand, was a mostly Benin society formed in the opposition to the Ogboni to break their seeming monopoly. Both societies were exclusive clubs with varied political, economic, spiritual, security, and other benefits. Though significantly reduced by modernity and the influence of colonialism, Benin's spiritual culture remained until I was born and up the time I moved to Edo College. There is an account I recollect of an event that happened during the Nigerian Civil War, precisely in 1967. Some Biafran soldiers had overrun the Midwest states and gained access to Ore, which they occupied for about 6 weeks. These soldiers were raping women, exploiting the villagers, and committing all manners of crime and atrocities until they got to the Benin village where they met their nemesis. The head of the village placed a curse on the soldiers, saying that any one of them who tried to violate their women would develop a swollen scrotum. Of course, the Biafrans did not believe this, and so some brazenly went ahead to commit the crime. Fear came upon the soldiers as the errant soldiers were afflicted, just as the village head had predicted. The resulting swollen scrotum, which burst through the offending soldier's trouser, was sufficient warning that the village head meant business and the Benin women were not to be toyed with. That was how potent Benin Juju was famed to be, and all of this influenced my earliest memory of the city as a diabolic one. It got so bad that some people were afraid of associating with Benin folks due to this profiling. I often avoid telling anyone that I am from Benin. In Edo College then, every student was required to join one ethnic dance group. I always joined the Igbo group, and when it was holiday time, I never stayed behind in the city. The moment school vacated, I went back to Enugu until my parents were forced to relocate to Benin, and I no longer had anywhere to run to. It took God intervention using Archbishop Bensi Idahosa to curb Benin fetishes. These days, the presence of shrines are not as commonplace as before. The adherents of the traditional religion still exist, but they are few and not visible. Christianity has taken over, and close to 85% of Beninese have embraced it. The Oba Palace, however, remains the custodian of the traditional religion. Journey to Benin. It was a legendary Jamaican political activist and Pan-Africanist, Marcus Garvey, who said, "A people without knowledge of their history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." A tree without roots is either dead or on its way to doing so. So, like I wrote earlier, to prevent a situation where rightful environment for my secondary school education, but there were limitations. They did not know anything about Benin School or anyone who could help me get into one. So, on my own, at the age of 14, I began to make inquiries about the secondary school available in different parts of the country. At the time, government college were the top institutions nationwide, and to get admitted into any of them, one had to sit for the common entrance examination. The examination was introduced to provide a general basis for primary school pupils to be admitted to the government college. A pupil planning to write this exam could select 3 books, 3 schools, the primary choice, and 2 other options. If you were not admitted into your primary choice, the other 2 were there to fall back on. After making my findings, I chose Edo College, Benin City, a premier government institution, as my primary choice, or better put, my parents chose it. While my other options were Government College, Umuahia, and St. Patrick College, Asaba. Fortunately, I passed the common entrance for Edo College and was offered admission. At that time, my father was the president of Benin Union in Enugu, as it has become a part of him to galvanize the Beninese everywhere he went. At the same time, the then immediate past Oba of Benin, Prince Akezua, was a district officer in Enugu, and he was the patron of the Benin Union. The after effect of this was that the Oba and my father naturally had a lot of dealings together, and closely too. Not many events can mark gradual and proud transition to adulthood like gaining admission into secondary school. More so when it is into a premium school like Edo College. Armed with this new metal suitcase, armed with my new metal suitcase and my first pair of shoes, some cook rice for the road, and my mother as escort, I embarked on the journey to resume secondary school in Benin. I remember going in a line 11 truck, and it took us 11 hours to travel from Enugu to Benin. The truck had benches at the back with tarpaulins to cover the top. Subsequently, spaces were never enough every time I had to travel. The vehicles were always overbooked. Children had to stand while the others would sit through the journey. Regardless, the trip to Benin from Enugu still fascinates me. Passing through the Milikins Hill, a road that links Enugu through Unguo to Onitsha, was always interesting. The road is over 3 kilometers and was initially constructed in 1909. It is sharply undulating and defined by steep, abrupt curves with rocks and vegetation on side, and a valley, the Iva Valley, on the other side. A misstep by an inexperienced or less cautious driver would mean tumbling into the valley. Suffice it to say that we usually had our heart in our mouth whenever we reach the Milikis Hills. Another exciting highlight of my travel then was seeing the Oji readathon. There is something symbolic about this town. It is the site of the Oji River Thermal Power Station, a power plant powered by coal. Coal was usually conveyed from Ekulu and Oyema coal line to the Oji Thermal Power Plant and channeled into the national grid. At Oji River, we would often see a cable car coming from the mines going to God knows where. That was how coal was conveyed from the coal mine in cable car or carts. This setup generated up to 10 MV of electricity, which was supplied to the plant's immediate vicinity. All the passengers often look forward to the intruding sight of big chart carts moving on a tiny cable overhead. It was something to remember. The Niger Bridge had not been constructed as at 1965. So was the only way to cross from Onitsha and Asaba to Asaba was the only way to cross from Onitsha to Asaba was by ferry. I remember two ferries. Then one was called Shanaham and the other Eriko. A rudimentary science was required to cross the River Niger then. The ferries were self-propelled rafts, barges with a ramp, and the ramp had to land on the slope first. Then passengers disembark from the vehicle. The next step is for the vehicle to go onto the ferry. Then, after which the passengers would get on the same ferry. The ferry will then take us to Asaba, where both vehicles and passengers would alight to continue their journey to Benin. It was quite an exciting experience, though as a child it was scary. It took about 40 minutes to cross from Onitsha to Asaba. Transporters did this regularly, conveying people to and fro in daylight, and it worked perfectly. Edo College, Benin. I was a perfect poster boy for the Johnny Just Come JJC alias when I got to Benin. JJC is a slang used to describe someone who's new to an environment. As much as my parents' decision for me to school in Benin was motivated by their desire for me to know about my roots, on getting there, they were reluctant to let me search for my extended family. They had been away for a while, so they were not sure of the reception I would get. This left me in a fish out of water situation. I had to find my way around, but really, I was not totally hopeless. On my first day at Edo College, before returning to Enugu, my mother handed me over to her younger brother, Uncle Alfred, who lived in Benin. He was to be my guardian. Uncle Alfred handled my entire admission process until I was fully settled in school. Uncle Alfred had a friend in our school, Mr. Felix Ebon, who incidentally was the head of students. As you would expect, Mr. Ebon, who then was in upper 6, second year of higher school certificate class, became my guardian in school. He was the First Republic, and Chief Dennis Osadegbe was the governor of the Midwest state as it was then known. Established in 1937, Edo College is the oldest secondary school in the Midwest region. The school administration was managed by the Federal Ministry of Education till 1973, when the administration moved to the Board of Education. The school premises was located right at the heart of Benin in a large, massive compound. We had football, cricket, an athletics field, and an Appian way. All the way from the school gate, mighty Osariemen trees line the Appian way on both sides. The Roman Appian way was well kept and paved with drainage on both sides. The principal residence was on the right, and the principal always trekked from there to school, to a distance of about 1 kilometer along the Appian way. Our principal, Mr. A. Shage, used to walk majestically to his office from his residence. He was the father of Itse Sage, renowned senior advocate of Nigeria and chairman of President Buhari Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. Itse was a young man then. The older Sage, our principal, though strict, could not really be described as a disciplinarian. Nevertheless, he had this aura that told you to comport and behave yourself whenever he gave you a disapproving look. If he saw you on the street, he looked at you and moved on without saying anything. But you immediately corrected anything inappropriate about you. If you had not tucked your shirt in properly, or something like that, you did so once Sage looked at you, even without even uttering a word. Most people who sign up as American Peace Corps volunteers do so for various reasons, one of which is to influence change in their service community. And for 34 years, between 1961 and 1995, Nigeria had the privilege of having these change makers hold different roles, such as teachers in different parts of the nation. Edo College got the first share of these volunteers as teachers in those days, and they played a significant role in my education. I had British, Indian, American, and other foreign teachers, and they were outstanding. I remember having a white history teacher, and at another time, a French teacher, Mr. J.T. Gransing. He was a petite and meticulous man who was always smartly dressed. He gave no room for nonsense. Imagine asking class 1 students who had probably never heard or spoken French before to communicate only in French during class. English language and vernacular were not allowed in his class. Gransing was somebody you could not forget in a hurry. If he asked you a question, you had to answer in French. He always had a ruler which he used to punish students who missed an answer. He used the ruler to hit our knuckles. Surprisingly, after 3 months in his class, most of us could speak basic French. It was incredible. Some of my classmates had already finished modern school, a post-secondary school. Some of them had children before coming to college. He used to tease these other students in French. His French accent was impeccable, and he wanted us to emulate that. In fact, during our school reunion in 2019, we formed a French class and somebody came out to role play Grand Sing. It was fantastic. Grand Sing ended up as a French professor at the University of Ibadan before returning to his country. Miss Pear and sundry teachers. Love the sea. Strike at the most unexpected time. And in the strange, what I had might more appropriately be termed infatuation, and at an unusual time indeed, I developed a crush for Miss Pear, a young Peace Corps lady who taught us English language. I was love struck enough to even compose a birthday poem for her titled, "Oh Miss Pear." I read the poem to her on her birthday and she was so flattered that she gave me a tight hug that left me feeling made for life. My dear, Miss Pear is now in her early 80s and lives in England. Teachers are like technology app program. They can write a program of life sequence in the hearts of their students. They are like sculptors. They can mold perception, worldview, and ultimately the destiny of their pupil. Of a truth, there is no telling the extent to which a touch, a smile, a word of encouragement, or a frown from a teacher can impact and shape a life. Some of the other teachers who impacted me include my fine arts teacher, Dr. Charlotte Omagbai, who now lives in America, and Mrs. Obaseki. I also remember our spectacle history teacher, Mr. S.B. Omorogie. Again, the memory of Mr. Akpokene, our agricultural teacher, will remain incredible as he inculcates in us the spirit of farming as a veritable means of food production from an early age. One American Peace Corps member who stood out was Mr. K.G. Watson, the physics teacher, Mr. S.K. Momodu of blessed memory, who was not only our physics teacher but also an ex-student of the school. He was later to become Dr. Momodu. A passionate lecturer at the University of Benin. He was a passionate Edo College Old Boy Association alumnus, and he served as the national president before his demise. Other teachers that come to mind include Dr. Darren, Mr. Enau, the mathematics guru, Mr. Ilor, Mr. Ogojafo, and Mr. Edokpolo. The chemistry teacher. I can go on and on about the teachers in Edo College because every teacher imparted me in their way. But while every other teacher was literate, there was one who was not. My woodwork teacher, Mr. Omoregi. He was an old carpenter and one of the most senior teachers in school. Woodwork was a subject that carried a lot of mark, and we had a carpentry workshop. Mr. Omorege was of colonial extraction and often wore white shorts, white socks, and white shoes. We used to call him Apia. He had a bicycle he rode to school. He would say, "Plant the one straight, plant the one straight and smooth, plant the one straight, smooth, through earth of winding." He meant to say, playing the one straight, playing the one straight and smooth, playing the one straight, smooth, through earth winding. We had our way with Apia, and we had fun, joked, laughed, and teased him, as long as we were not caught. But when it was time for examination, the story changed. Even though the subject was practical, the examination was theoretical. If you fail to remember all his instruction, you failed the subject. Where it gets unpalatable is that our examination results were always heavily determined and impacted by the woodwork results. Your true performance in the other subjects notwithstanding, you could score 80% to 90% in other subjects, but your woodwork result could bring you crashing down to an overall 60%. The funny thing was, Apia scored you not according to your academic performance, but according to who you were and how he perceived you. Whether you were a good or bad boy, he had a clerk who used to do the right thing and marking for him. We asked the clerk, "Who is the next student?" The clerk will answer, "The next student is Ehenede Akenzua." And Apia will respond, "Give him 90, na oba pikin." Then we ask, "Who be the next student?" The clerk will answer again, "The next student is Gregory Ogbefu." And Akpa will say, "Owigbo, give him 10. Our dormitories were named after some past Oba. We had Eweke House, the oldest, followed by Ozolwa House, then Esige House, where I was stayed, and Akenzua House. After Esige House, the naming convention changed to European principals, and so there were Spare House and Nana House, for example. In each house, we had a shared open bathroom with multiple showers. The bathroom had no roof, just walls, and then ropes hanging towards an adjoining toilet, on which we hung our towels while bathing. All students had their baths simultaneously, but the older ones could decide to use the bathroom first, not minding that we were classmates. We had a house laundryman, an old man we call Esige House washerman, who used to wash our clothes and beddings and iron them. In the dormitory itself, the houses were organized and we were well cared for. As soon as you arrived, you were handed over to a sort of mentor or college father, referred to as a woman. He took care of you, put you through the system, monitored you, and punish you if you misbehave. In return, you clean his shoes, carry his cutlery to the dining hall, and things like that. My college father was Felix Ebon, Uncle Felix's friend. As head student, he was looked on like a god, and as his college son, I dare not misbehave in school. If I was punished for some demerit in class, when I get, he will punish me as well. In short, I had to always ensure I was a good boy and not get into trouble. Edo College operated a system based on purely merit. According to our school report, we are categorized into class, and the teachers were a mix of expatriates and Nigerians. Education was fantastic in those days. The school was non-denominational, so on Fridays, the Muslims went to their mosques. On Sundays, the Christians went to their church, and it was a fitting and beautiful arrangement, even though we lived a regimented life. School was exciting. A compulsory siesta followed lunch, and after siesta, it was sport. We played different sports like football, cricket, and athletics. During the season, and basketball and baseball. I remember Mr. Okpe, our athletics sports master. Then we also have a co-ed higher school certificate, HSC section. The secondary school section was purely male, but the HSC was mixed, and the female had their hostel outside the school premises. For most of my stay at Edo College, I was reported to be a quiet, diligent, well-behaved child and student. My parents did not have much, so my provision consisted of gari, aki, pamkane, and azumangala, a type of smoked fish cut into chunks. Every time, my father gave me £1, 10 shillings as a pocket money, which took care of everything I needed for the period, excluding books. While some privileged students could afford to behave flippantly, I was cautious not to get into trouble. Whenever there were good movies in those days, they were shown in cinemas in town, and some students would sneak out to watch. I could not dare. Such things as my father would kill me if he ever found out. But like the serpent tempted him, I faced my temptation in class 4. It came in form of the 1966 war film, Lost Command. The movie attracted so much publicity that it felt like the greatest thing that had ever happened in the entertainment industry. At the time, it was eventually scheduled to show in Benin at the Lido Cinema, and many of my schoolmates planned to sneak out to watch the movie. Since our housemaster usually went around the house at night to see if students were in their rightful place, Trump's warning to sneak out would arrange their pillow, bed sheet, and blanket in the shape of a human being. The idea was, of course, to deceive the housemaster. I feared my dad and the consequences of getting into trouble. But when my colleague said, "Greg, you mean you won't go and watch Lost Command? Let's go. Are you the only one in this school?" My resistance broke. My voice kept saying, "Don't." There was no way I was going to miss Lost Command. I said to myself, unbeknownst to us, the school authority has gotten wind of our plan. And that night, they activated a more thorough inspection of the hostel. They went from bed to bed, compiling the names of those absent. The judgment came swiftly for the absent students, and it was at the assembly the very next morning. Our maid, who did not sneak out to see Lost Command, had informed us of what happened in our absence, so we knew we were in real trouble. I just kept muttering to myself, "My father will kill me today." My head was filled with pictures of both my biological and college father descending on me, because I was always winning prizes. Most of the HSC girls liked me. I was like their golden boy, and this had many benefits, including getting free food provisions from them frequently. Well, the good boy was about to get whipped publicly in front of all his admirers. Suddenly, the cloud looked blurrier and cloudier than usual, a sight that is not uncommon on Judgment Day. In Edo College, our morning assemblies held outside in open space. That morning, the principal talked about ethics, about the reward of being a good student and the consequences of being a bad one. His speech was long, like that of a Supreme Court judge about to deliver a sentence. After he talked, the teachers called out all the students involved in the previous night truancy, about 70 of us. When my name was mentioned, I could see some of my seniors glancing at each other as if asking if I was in trouble. I knew I was in trouble. All of us offenders were lined up, and 7 young and strong teachers with long canes came to. 7 young and strong teachers with long canes joined us. 10 pupils were assigned to each teacher to receive 24 lashes of cane, each on our buttocks. I felt dead already. The pain I anticipated would be meted on my body by the lashes was nothing to the pain of disgracing my family. To say I felt miserable would be painting my feelings nicely. There I was to be publicly flogged and humiliated before teachers, whom I was nothing but a cherubic. Female students who adored me and everybody else, most of whom held me in high regards. When my turn came to be beaten, the whole place became silent, and you could almost hear a pin drop. It was an unusual sight to see Greg Oberfun about to be flogged. Unfortunately for me, the man for the jog was no other than Mr. Akpokene, the agricultural science teacher of blessed memory. A very wicked one in the opinion of students. Well, back then, the teachers who hardly spared the cane were tagged wicked. I can never forget him. Without sparing any seconds, Mr. Akpokene commenced the duty. When the first stroke landed, I did not shake.